Um, we have a smaller world, as Gulen says. One of the consequences of creating a global village is interreligious dialogue is not a luxury but a necessity. We don't live in a world where you can go through your whole lifetime and perhaps never meet somebody from another religious tradition. It's virtually impossible. So it's a necessity. Um, all right. Thank you.
And my question is to Ms. Crystal McCormick. Thank you so much for looking at these two friends, Western feminism and Gulen movement, as you put. I am, a bit myself. I am pursuing my graduate studies at University of Toronto. I'm studying anthropology in collaborative program with women and gender studies. What you were reading in Fethullah Gülen's texts as Western feminism is different than what Western feminism is understood and being practiced here. Actually, he was referring to Western feminism in Turkey, its reflection in Turkey, because as a Muslim veiled woman who spent her 25 years of her life in Turkey, and I studied sociology in Turkey and had several encounters with feminists, I used to be defined as oppressed, eventually inferior, and I need to be saved. And according to those points of the feminists, my choices were defined as barricades on the pathway of liberation of women. And I never liked that. And it was only after I came here, like approximately 4 years ago, I noticed that there is multiplicity of feminisms. There are multiple ways of expressing womanhood and your female point of view. And it was, but like I noticed this only after I came here. You know what I mean? So, and after this, I was so happy to notice that my voice was valued by feminism as opposed to my first encounter of feminists in Turkey. So, so this is just a little note about what Fethullah Gülen was referring there as Western feminism. And what you mentioned before, like at the very beginning of your talk, to women being in demand, reading Salah, singing, etc. These things may or may not be our understanding of liberation. It's very important to let Muslim women express their own demands rather than assuming that they are assuming they are demanding these. And it's I am studying about veiled women, and I had several. I did have chance to do interviews with young veiled women in Montreal and also in Turkey, and I never heard such a demand from these young veiled women to read a salah, for example. But instead, and they never mentioned that they were feeling invisible. On the contrary, they were keeping to mention that they were overly visible. Their appearance was highly stigmatized and giving certain meanings to other people, and they never liked it. And it's very important for me as an anthropologist. Maybe it's because rather than looking at texts, I am in touch with actual people and I have chance to listen their stories. So I just wanted to give this insight, and I want to finalize my words with Kristen Plasko's comments on feminist theory of religion. Quote, what happens when we impose our understanding of liberation to other women whose interpretation of liberation is different from ours, end quote. Thanks.
I think this is, first of all, okay, I want to go back to what you were saying about the veil.
Can you speak into the mic?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. There is an assumption, a lot of times what I've noticed in my few encounters with Muslim women is that there is an assumption that Western feminism, and when I say Western feminism, I'm talking about mostly North American feminists, that Western feminists are going to view the veil as some sort of symbol of oppression and against the women's movement. And that is also, I think, a caricature that we need to be careful of. That being said, I have heard Western feminists at forums say openly that they believe that the veil is a symbol of oppression towards women. This is offensive, and this is a misunderstanding for many Western feminists. And I think this is just another great reason and example why this conversation needs to happen, not only between women, but between women and men. Because there is misunderstandings about the veil, there are misunderstandings about how I might determine freedom within my Christian tradition and how you might determine that as well. And so I'm glad that you raised that. I have met some women who are, I think of one woman I met in Austin, Texas, who was married to a Pakistani, and she was an American. I guess that's all I wanted to say. The other thing is Judith Plaskow is a Jewish feminist theologian who you referred to, and I think that you're right, and that's something that I will always have to continue to learn, is not to imagine what my view of oppression is. It may not be oppressive to somebody else. But that is a conversation that has to continue to happen.
Professor McCormick. So I asked this question in a Christian context, and I must say, as an Orthodox Christian, you mentioned that feminism, Western feminism in general, although I acknowledging as well that, as you say, it is not a homogeneous movement, monolithic. It's reacting against the dualisms that one encounters in the fallen world, master-slave, leadership, subjection. But don't we believe that, actually, well, I should state it, we believe that Christ actually overcame the world and the dualisms associated with that fallen world. And has not this been made manifest in the person of Christ, the God-man who took the form of a slave, humiliated himself, and gave his life? That's on the part of man. And on the part of women, in the person of the Virgin Mary, who the Orthodox regard as the mother of God, the greatest of God's creatures, more glorious beyond compare than the cherubim and the seraphim, as our hymnography declares. She who in Scripture commands, "Do as my son says." She commands it, she doesn't ask it. And in iconography, with her hand of authority, directs the faithful to Christ. So if this is the case, then why must one necessarily equate leadership with superiority and obedience with inferiority? Therefore, isn't feminism perpetuating the same dualism against which it is reacting, dualisms which Christ himself overcame and taught and enabled others to overcome?